Chenoa Farnsworth is managing partner of Blue Startups, which is a tech accelerator based in Honolulu. Chenoa also manages the Hawaii Angels Investment Network. John Hartnett, we heard from earlier. John is the founder and CEO of SVG Ventures Thrive and is based in Silicon Valley. George Kellerman is here from Japan. He's vice president of Woven by Toyota, which is Toyota's investment fund. Interestingly, George received his bachelor's degree from University of Hawaii at Manoa a few years ago, and then his law degree from Berkeley. And Jun Long Tay is from Singapore. He's a regional director of the Americas for the Singapore Economic Development Board, EDB, and Jun Long is based in Chicago. And finally, the moderator of the panel is Thomas Heaton. Thomas is an award-winning journalist at the Honolulu-based Civil Beat, and Thomas focuses on food systems and the Pacific. And he's worked for several journalism companies in the United States, in Nepal, and in New Zealand over the last 9 years. And Thomas is from New Zealand. So if I could call all those folks up to the stage, please, and we'll start this conversation. I need one more. Let's see. I need one more thing here. It's great. Nice to see you. We need one more chair. I'm John. There he is. Okay.
Good, thank you. How are you? Thanks for having me. Aloha. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me. As Jim said, I'm Thomas Heaton. I'm a journalist with Civil Beat. I cover the food system in the Pacific, and so I'm very grateful to Jim and Jason for giving me the stage with these four esteemed people to discuss the topic of innovation ecosystem building for Hawaii and the Asia Pacific. Essentially here to interrogate the question of how Hawaii can become a hub for the formulation of ideas and a place to transform those ideas into reality. So without further ado, I'd like to get into this. To start, please. So firstly, I'd like to start off with Chenoa, please. You've got years of experience working in Hawaii's ecosystem with hundreds of startups, and those startups have gone on to raise millions upon millions of dollars in capital. So I'm just wondering if you could give us a few examples of the most successful startups that you've come across. And secondly, could you please tell us perhaps a little bit of about what those startups all have in common that makes them so successful?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. This is exciting to see. This new development in ag tech, I think, is something we should be definitely working towards. As Jim said earlier, we need to get our bite of this apple. It only makes sense. So in terms of some startups that we've seen, again, just refresh on who I am and what I've been doing. So investing here in Hawaii for about the last 20 years as an angel investor, VC, and most recently in an accelerator kind of model. So the last 10 years in the accelerator, the success we've seen primarily coming out of Hawaii is in a couple different categories. Keep in mind that we only invest in technology companies, so that's a pretty narrow slice of this universe. But sustainability is a big one for us, actually. Our biggest wins have been in the sustainability area. So Volta Charging Network is one that went public 2 years ago. Very proud of that. Started here in Hawaii. There was good reason for them to be here. Of course, we're a very early adopter of electric cars and electric car charging here in Hawaii, so it made sense for them. Flow Water is another one that came out of Hawaii that we're very, very proud of, that was acquired in 2021. That is a refillable water bottle station. So, and that was started by a surfer from Kauai who was very concerned about pollution in the oceans, primarily from plastic water bottles, which we all need to just stop doing that. So those are some examples. I think sustainability is a really big area for us. I'm very, very hot on aquaculture and what it can do for the state. I think that's a really great area for us. We've made several kind of shots on goal there that have fallen short, and I think, I hope now is the time that we can get that off the ground here. Some of the barriers in the past, going way back into a little bit of ancient history here, have been primarily around permitting and operations issues in Hawaii that have made it difficult to get aquaculture going here in a meaningful way. But I'm hopeful that we can get some of those barriers removed. Second part of your question, what makes a successful entrepreneur? If I knew that, I would be a bazillionaire right now. No, I mean, everybody has their own opinion of that. We work with very early stage companies. So really right at the stage that we're working with companies, we're just thinking about the team and who they are and do they have the right capabilities to move forward, be flexible. Every company nowadays is going to go through multiple pivots. It's very rare to see a company that comes to you with a certain proposal and ends up, sticking with that kind of business model throughout. There are many, many pivots ensue typically until a company finds that product market fit. So we're really just looking at the team. Do they have the right attributes to weather that storm? I think the biggest thing for me is finding people that have both vision and the ability to look at the detail of their business, and they're not scared off by spreadsheets or, every little minutia. They're interested in the minutia, but also able to strike a vision. I think the founders of the companies I outlined, they all have that in common.
Fantastic, thank you. Next, I'd like to ask you, John. You've been working to make Thrive a truly global platform, and you've said that Hawaii could become a prime location to narrow and bridge the corridor in the Asia Pacific. Of course, that's going to require bolstering the innovation ecosystem here in an isolated location with plenty of its own challenges. But considering your global experience and considering what Senator Dela Cruz shared with us earlier, how do you see it playing out in Hawaii?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me here. And, the ecosystem, is a great buzzword. Everybody uses it, and, but different people have different perspectives of what the ecosystem is. And in order to kind of create a vibrant ecosystem, you need to have kind of key components and key players to be part of that. We look at the ecosystem as like the foundation of the house. It's something you don't see, but if you don't have a really great foundation, your house doesn't last too long. And that's why we decided to kind of invest and build out our ecosystem. And I have a slide there, maybe I could share, rather than talking in abstract in terms of what an ecosystem is, I can share what our ecosystem is. Maybe if they could put up the slide, maybe. And
there you go.
So this is, basically the ecosystem. That wagon wheel is how we kind of look at the ecosystem and talk about it. Our ecosystem to date has created about $1.6 billion in value, 2,200 jobs, and we've been ranked #1 accelerator in the world, #1 in terms of investment as well. But it has to be truly global, and I think when you're looking at the ecosystem here in Hawaii, it's not the Hawaii ecosystem on its own. It's how the Hawaii ecosystem connects with key places on the planet here. For us, kind of at 1 o'clock, having industry players part of this is crucial. These are the large corporations that are looking for investment, that are looking for potential acquisitions. They're trying to get a finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening in the innovation ecosystem. They're looking for the needle in the haystack. It's very hard for them to find, great entrepreneurs around the world because they have so many of them knocking at their doors. So really kind of building that relationship with the corporates is key. Obviously, from a startup perspective, we're working with over 10,000 startups now. We're in Silicon Valley, but all the startups are not in Silicon Valley. People have this kind of illusion that Silicon Valley is this kind of Disneyland. which it is, but the entrepreneur, it's a destination for these entrepreneurs because they're looking for money and they're looking for customers and they're looking for talent. And, you know, this is the place they kind of come to, and they've come to there for the last 80, 90 years. So what is the reason why people would come to Hawaii? And what are the incentives for an entrepreneur to set up here? Or, you know, how can you help the existing entrepreneurs there is going to be key. Obviously, investors, we co-invest with major investors. It's how you do business. You just don't invest on your own, but it's a key part of this. Farmers, we've kind of put in the center of our ecosystem. If you're in the world of agriculture, the farmer is probably your customer. So really understanding the problem of the farmer is really important. And also farmers, they do business with people they trust for decades. So it's a tough distribution channel to try and navigate, and hence we kind of built relationships with key farming organizations, you know, like the likes of Land of Lakes, who are the largest cooperative in the United States, Western Growers, which represent 2,500 of the largest farmers in the West Coast of the United States. So really engaging with the farmers is a crucial part of our success and probably the differentiator of how we've been able to be successful. Obviously, government play a key role here in terms of supporting entrepreneurs, but also kind of working with government. We work with various different governments. We launched the U.S. Innovation Agenda with the Secretary of Agriculture in 2020, and we drove innovation, and specifically innovation coming from entrepreneurs as a kind of a key part, you know, of that. Innovation, in a lot of cases, starts in universities and institutions. So again, understanding what's happening there, how can you know, I think many universities around the world, it's not unique anywhere, commercialization of research is probably the biggest challenge that they have. So how can you engage with universities to help bring that you know, great piece of research to life in a product and in a business? And in events like this and programs and activities, you know, accelerator programs, challenges, events like this bring people together, and people do business with people that they meet. I know we all love Zoom for the last 3 years, but ultimately you build relationships, you do business, you shake hands with people, and that's a key part of these kind of events, which is a crucial part of how we do it. So that's our ecosystem, just to kind of put it in a nutshell. And I think, you know, standing back from this is a matter of what are the assets and the strengths of Hawaii. I think your proximity to Asia Pacific, part of the US, you know, the strength in agriculture and aquaculture is incredible. Obviously, I hadn't realized how many successes you've had here already in terms of founders. So how do you build that out and connect it to the world? If you want to stay an island, build your own ecosystem. If you want to be a global leader, connect with the world.
Thank you, John. I think that naturally leads us to Junlong Day. I'm wondering, you know, from that global perspective, I'm very interested in where Singapore has been working in the broader ag tech space. Could you please tell us about what areas are of particular interest for Singapore as Regional Director for the Americas when it comes to international collaboration, and what opportunities there could be for Hawaii and Singapore?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. And maybe before I start, can I get a sense from the room on who has been to Singapore before? Okay, that's a lot of people. Okay, I thought you guys didn't know about Singapore, but you know.
Before you were born.
Well, so actually, you know, Singapore, it's alike with, I mean, it's very similar to Hawaii in that we are really an island state surrounded by waters. And, you know, when it comes to resources, we don't have quite, I guess, the vibrancy and luxury of what Hawaii has. And I mentioned that because, you know, if you think about Singapore's land size, from east to west of the island, we are a marathon length. From north to south, we are half a marathon length. So land, not quite there. And this has really necessitated us taking a very open approach when collaborating with countries globally. And I think that very much extends into the broader agri-food space. So my colleague Jean earlier, she touched on a bit on what we are focused on in Singapore, and I'll not belabor her points. But I think there are three main areas in which we're interested in ag tech. And it's centered around, I guess, our own country's focus on trying to build food resilience. So number one, urban agriculture, right? So because we don't have much land, what we're thinking of is how can we best embrace production methods or modes which make use or which are land efficient, right, which serve well in a densely populated urban setting. So that's your vertical farming. And then you have your alternative proteins, beyond traditional protein sources. Can we work with countries and companies globally to develop, other proteins derived from fermentation, derived from cell cultivation? And then last but not least, aquaculture, right? So aquaculture, again, important to us, the Singaporeans, we love our seafood, so I think personally, it's absolutely critical for us to start working with the who's of the aquaculture world to make sure we do well there. And when you think about, I guess, Hawaii and Singapore and what's probably the lowest hanging fruit, to me it's probably in the aquaculture space. And when you think about modes of collaboration, I would bucket them into number one, innovation, number two, commercial. So in terms of innovation, again, as my colleague G, she shared earlier, we are thinking of building, we'll announce the launch of Aquapolis, right? And in the aquaculture space, we are focused on three main problem statements, which we think we can make an impact in. First of all, genetics. We think we have done relatively well in the area of Asian sea bass or barramundi, but what about other species like red snappers, marine tilapia, or even the venomous shrimp? And of course, I know Jim is one of the godfathers of that particular space there. In the area of health and nutrition, I think what we recognize is a lot of the innovation work done in this space has been really driven by either Europe and even parts of US. And a lot of the products and services are thus geared towards maybe fish reared in colder waters, temperate waters. In tropical waters, when it comes to health and nutrition solutions, when it comes to feed and feed additives, can Singapore work with the who's who and perhaps folks in Hawaii to develop solutions which work best here? And then last but not least, in terms of systems, right? As we think about, in the manufacturing space, there is like Industry 4.0. But for us, we're thinking about what does Aqua 4.0 look like, right? We have RES, and we have like multi-trophic aquaculture systems. The question is, how can we stitch all this together and work with players, countries, states alike to test that idea and make sure we are able to export that globally? So innovation, I think that's something that we really look forward to working with the state of Hawaii on, whether it's your public researchers or whether it's the private sector. The other big bucket lies around commercial. And this is, Singapore is located at the heart of Southeast Asia. 625 million people today, 7th largest economic bloc globally, one of the fastest growing. It's expected to be the 4th largest economic bloc in a couple of decades. And this means, there are market opportunities in Asia Pacific. So Southeast Asia is there. Within Singapore, if you do like a 3 to 4 hour flight radius, you gain access to pretty much the whole of Southeast Asia. That's 625 million people. You extend that to 5 to 6 hours flight radius, you gain access to the whole of Asia Pacific. And that is 4.2 billion people today and growing. So I think commercial-wise, just being in the same time zone as many of these countries, it has helped many companies across different industries, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, etc. And this is something we're looking to extend towards for the agri-food sector. And in Singapore, I guess what we are trying to do to of course, propagate this is put in place ecosystem value propositions. For example, if it comes to innovation, right, we have the world's strongest, or Asia's strongest IPE regime, and the world's second strongest. You think about free trade agreements, we have free trade agreements with 60% of the world's GDP. So just from a doing business point of view, if there are Hawaiian companies and Hawaiian ecosystem partners who want to work with Singapore, I think we're very happy to embrace that.
Great. Thank you very much. Next up, George. Hawaii has had lofty goals for food production for a long time. It's had lofty green energy goals. It's had tech innovation goals, one that you were especially close to when you were an intern, actually, with Senator Matthew Matsunaga in the early 90s. So here we are a few decades later. I'm just wondering if you could give us a bit of a frank estimation of where we're at right now in Hawaii as a place of innovation and agricultural innovation, and consider perhaps what some of the key gaps are that you see.
Yeah, thank you. As Jim mentioned earlier, I am a graduate of the University of Hawaii, and during that time, I was an intern for Hawaii State Matt Matsunaga. He was the Senate Chair of Science, Technology, and Economic Development Committee. I later went on, after I graduated, to run his committee. And one of the things that Matt Matsunaga was trying to do at the time, and for those of you who don't know, he was the son of former U.S. Senator Spark Matsunaga. Matt was trying to turn, and this was 30 years ago, this was in the early 90s, he was trying to turn Hawaii into a high-tech hub. And there were a number of initiatives that were started in that decade in terms of trying to attract people to come here. But I think it's not enough to just try to attract technology to come here. You also have to get them to retain. So like Chenoa was talking about Volta. I used to be a managing partner at 500 Startups. I led 2 rounds of investment in Volta Technologies, but the management team moved to California. They didn't stay here. They eventually did go public, and then they were acquired by Shell. So great, it started here, but like, what was the actual economic impact to Hawaii, and how do you get those people to come here and then stay here? I know for myself, when I graduated from the University of Hawaii, there simply weren't jobs that were of caliber or interest or that I could make enough money to grow a family and live comfortably. I eventually went to the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, and I remember thinking, well, you know, I should go back to Hawaii and be an attorney, and I looked at the starting salaries, and it was about half of what I could make in Silicon Valley at the time. And I had student loans. So I think you have to kind of look at all of these things and how they interplay. And as John was talking about, it's really an ecosystem. It's the interplay between all of these things. You can't just focus on one thing. You really have to look at how they affect each other. And I don't think I've answered your question. What was your question again?
I guess a frank estimation of how Hawaii is going.
Frank estimation is you are way behind. Senator De La Cruz mentioned that agriculture is 90% of the agriculture is imported, like Singapore, similar. But I think the big difference is, you said you're surrounded by water, yes, but it's a very thin, narrow amount of water. You're a short train, truck, or car ride across a bridge, and you have access to Malaysia, you have Indonesia, you have these large agricultural areas that are relatively close. Compared to Hawaii, you are thousands of miles away from large agricultural spaces. And so when you talk about importing 90% of your food, it's a little different when you're importing 90% across thousands of miles of ocean versus across a bridge. And to that same extent, if only, I think you said 0.5% of GDP is agriculture, that tells me one thing. Am I quoting Senator De La Cruz correctly? Was it 0.5%? Yeah. That means you have massively invested over the last several decades. It's shocking to me. If you would have asked me before coming here today, I would have said, oh, it's maybe 5%, 10%. If it has fallen to 0.5%, it means you have massively underinvested. And so a lot of these programs and these things, I think I was prepared to say you should 10x your investment. It's like, no, you need to 50x or 100x your investment in this space if you are serious about food security and your sustainability. You can't just dribble it out. You know, it's the old saying, I don't want to quote the Bible here, but, you know, you reap what you sow. And if you don't sow investment in this space, you are going to pay for it later. You are going to go from 90% imports to 95, to 96, to 97. At what point do you get serious about actually being sustainable and building the infrastructure and having a technology base that you can export?
One thing I'm wondering is...
You wanted a frank
assessment. That was about as frank as it gets, yeah. One thing we've talked about is kind of political and social will, you know. I'm just wondering about how do you foster that, and how do you, on what you're talking about here, of the exporting the technology, how do we develop the technology in the first place? Not only attracting people, but also developing it in our educational institutions, and this is for anyone.
And if I may,
Please.
Just jump on this. I've been thinking about this. I did a little homework before I came here, and I was looking at the, what is it? It's the me see if I can find it here. It's the School of, the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources. And I was looking at the degrees that are offered. And if anyone is from the University of Hawaii and part of that college, I apologize, but I'm going to be very direct and frank. I was looking at the bachelor's degree programs, and you could get a degree in fashion design and merchandising. You can get a degree in human development and family studies. What does that have to do with agriculture? I'm sorry, I'm just like trying to connect the dots here. But none of the degree programs, and if you really want to get serious, you look at the master's programs and the doctoral degree programs, because that's where the research is really happening. I don't see anything in here in engineering. I don't see anything here in high tech. And so that's, again, where there's a lack of investment in those places. And one of the things that I've done at many conferences I've spoken at before in agriculture, just to give you some quick background, I was one of the founding members of Yamaha Motor Ventures, and I led their agricultural automation and robotics investment practice. And after 3 years, Yamaha's Motor is not known as an agriculture company. They're a sport and recreation company. They make motorcycles, ATVs, and robotics. I actually got to the point where Yamaha announced publicly in their shareholder annual report that agricultural robotics and automation was going to be a growth driver for them over the next 10 years. And that was based on a lot of the work that I had done in terms of investing in agricultural automation and robotics. But the point is, if the youth today, and this is a problem across all agriculture, the youth don't want to go into agriculture. What is their image of agriculture? It's hard, it's dusty, it's sweaty, they got to work outdoors. But I compare it to the military. The military advertises on TV all the time. You don't see commercials of people storming the beaches at Iwo Jima. You see commercials of people sitting at high-tech, terminals. They're flying drones. They're using joysticks. They're talking. It's still military, but they're marketing it as this is a high-tech alternative. If you're interested in technology, I think agriculture has a branding problem, and so you really need to rebrand what the future of agriculture is and get the next generation excited. I saw some of the programs that Senator Dela Cruz talked about at the community college level, the high school level. It's a good start, but all of the community colleges in Hawaii should have those programs. All of the high schools should have those programs. And again, it's around marketing and advertising and building that brand image that Hawaii can be a technology leader in the future.
I mean, I would just kind of build on this in a couple of maybe three things. Some of the most successful small islands or countries in the world have a lot of challenges to overcome, but they have overcome them by having a formula of how they do business. Ireland was the poorest country in Europe. It's now the Silicon Valley of Europe. We just heard from Singapore, quite a small country, but it's a massive player in the industry worldwide. Israel is surrounded by not water, but sand, and in a very difficult environment, and yet it's one of the leading innovation hubs on the planet. So what have they all done is the first thing I would be figuring out and applying that to Hawaii. And if you look at some of the key things that they have done, I know in our own case in Ireland, first and foremost, investing in talent, but making this very focused in a key way. The percentage of GDP, R&D investment as a percentage of GDP, the highest percentages in the world are countries like Israel, Ireland, Denmark. Don't know exactly what it is in Singapore, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty high. It can be anywhere between 2 to 3.5% of GDP. So how much money is going into research and development? I think the second thing is kind of really focusing on your strength. You can't be 50 different things. You have to focus on what your strength is and build that and be the best in the world of what you do. And I think from a connectivity perspective, you call it marketing, and it's a good way to kind of put it, but connectivity to the world is very, very important. What Israel and Ireland have done is they have leveraged their diaspora in the United States. There are 5 million people in Ireland. There are 35 million Irish Americans. There are, I think, about 7 million people in Israel, and it's probably 2x that in the United States. What have they done? They have built relationships with these people that care about their homeland. And I think, you know, that's an opportunity to understand your diaspora. And some of those success stories that are over in Silicon Valley at the moment that are Hawaiian, how can you bring them back to help mentor, guide, inspire young kids? And I think these would be kind of 3 of the things I would look at. But start out, you don't have to kind of figure, there are countries that have figured this out already. You don't have to kind of figure it out and create the wheel yourself. You can figure it out by looking at what other countries are doing.
So just a few comments on that. I think a hopeful note, things have shifted quite a bit in the last couple of years, and I'm sure you guys have felt this, right? We have actually an influx of talent right now in Hawaii. Some of that is being perceived with negativity. I only can see the positive in having people want to make their living here and their livelihood here. So I think we, as a state, need to embrace this influx of talent. And that talent is going to work in all sectors. They are working in tech, they are working in ag, they are working in aquaculture, they are working in a myriad of different areas, AI, you name it, right? The world has shifted since COVID. It is okay to not be in Silicon Valley right now. I've seen that happen over and over again. Just look at LinkedIn profiles. We've had a bunch of Bay Area folks here hiding out who have never wanted to be public. Like, oh, I actually live in, you know, Haleiwa. Well, now I'm seeing those LinkedIn profiles change to Haleiwa. So the world has shifted, and that is in our favor right now. Right now is an opportunity for Hawaii to embrace that influx of talent. We, for the first time in 20 years I've been doing this work, have a brain gain, not a brain drain. And what are we going to do to capitalize on it, I think, is the open question. Are we going to embrace that? Are we going to encourage those people to stay here? Or are we going to reject that and have them hightail it right out of here back to Silicon Valley? Because that's what's happening right now. So I think that's an opportunity for us to really kind of flip the script and see it as an opportunity as opposed to a threat, as opposed to these people are here to take our jobs, our homes, to increase pricing. All of that is an issue. I get it. I totally get it. But if we can flip it and really put these people to work in our local economy, build something here, I think that's a huge opportunity for us. I'll just give a real quick example. We just launched our Blue Startups cohort 15 yesterday. George was smart. He got out of this business a long time ago.
Yeah, no, I remember the first one.
Right?
It's great.
But what I'll say what's different about this cohort versus others is we do have a lot of transplants. You might view that negatively, but again, I'm going to view it positively. These are people who are second-time founders. These are people who have real experience in real companies and tech businesses on the mainland and have decided to make their homes here. So I think this is a big shift for us, and it's an opportunity for us. So I just want to encourage us to embrace as opposed to reject.
Yeah, I think this is a great point because, I mean, you can always kind of navigate to the negative when there's a lot of positive there, and I think I totally agree with that. I would say that successful entrepreneurs, if you're going to create a global company, you might have to, I mean, it could be Silicon Valley, it can be anywhere else. If the main economy that you're selling to is there and some of your investors there, it's hard not to be there. I think COVID taught us a little thing about Zoom and being able to communicate, which is great. But you do business and build relationships, you know, face to face. What Israel and what Ireland have done is these big companies that have gone public. So Stripe are a $90 billion company founded by 2 young kids from Limerick, my hometown. They went to they couldn't get any funding in Ireland. They couldn't get the government to give them any money. They couldn't get the banks. They couldn't get venture capital because there wasn't that thing there. They went there because nobody would give them a break. And then they got a break, and they created this massive company. But what did they do? They're employing about 10,000 people in Dublin in Ireland, and they've created their engineering and R&D hub here. Same thing happens in Israel. A lot of these companies look like US companies, but they're employing tens of thousands of people probably the key part of every company is R&D, and they're all in the mothership or back home, whereas the front office is where the customers are. So that business model is something that kind of happens, and it's not a bad thing to come to Silicon Valley, but if you can create thousands of jobs in both locations, that's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to add on to the three of them, I think they covered many different points. But I did also want to pick up on the whole political will, government role in this play, right? So, just quoting Singapore, for example, I think it's absolutely possible to turn an area of vulnerability into an area of strength. So if you look at, in Singapore, we started off importing water from Johor across from Malaysia. And as a result of that, because we wanted to really focus on building national resilience and stuff, we designed a strategy called the 4 national taps. Essentially what this meant was the government had to play a very active, proactive role in pouring in resources to work with the global leaders of the world in terms of building these technologies, making sure that in Singapore we build up that capability we need to succeed in this area. So what happened was, now we have 4 national taps, natural water reclamation, we have water desalination, we have our reservoirs, and then of course we have, I guess what we call seawater reclamation, but in Singapore we call it new water. New water is essentially, you take the sewage water, you bring it through a process of reverse osmosis, UV disinfection, etc., and then you get ultra pure water. The thing here is, when it comes to like 4 national taps, all is well and good. And in fact, today, when there are severe drought sessions, we are in fact now exporting water back to the likes of Malaysia. So I think this is an example of how, with significant or enough government will and resources, you can definitely turn an area of vulnerability into an area of strength.
Sorry, I'm very sorry about that. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, turning that vulnerability into a strength is, something that I think we'll all be thinking about. Looking at the level of investments that there might need to be in such isolation, I'm wondering, one thing that has been consistent in touching on has been kind of this idea of regulation and where the government's role in this really is. And one consistent bugbear, and one that I'm sure has come from many of the people in this room, have uttered themselves, is the investment in agriculture, and how that might have a flow-on effect to technology. I'm wondering, going back to kind of what you said, George, putting one's money where their mouth is, what is the smartest direction of doing that? I'm wondering, where do we start?
Well, kind of a theme of something that Chenoa, John, and Jun said. At the end of the day, venture capital, historically, and I think COVID has modified this a little, but it's still basically true, it's a local industry. Historically, VCs would not invest in a company that would more than a 1-hour drive from their office, because they wanted to be able to go check up on them. They wanted to be able to go and see and touch and make sure that the company was doing what it said it was going to do, and look on it and make sure it was getting the support it needed. If Blue Startups wasn't here, frankly, Hawaii would be in a much worse situation. Like, having an investment arm like Blue Startups that is local, that's willing to make local investments, because it's very difficult for VCs outside of Hawaii. They look at Hawaii and they go, well, that's an interesting technology, but what's your market? Is your market global? Is your market the United States? Is it just Hawaii? And they, VC by nature, you're looking for the 10x, the 100x. You're looking for that really big return. And so the other way around that is the government, basically, and I think this is really the case here in Hawaii. It's true in agriculture too. John and I have seen this in other markets, because agriculture is not like a software program where you can just have a couple of coders write some software and then boom, it's a 1000x valuation. It takes years. Like, if you can only harvest a crop once a year, well, your ability to test your technology is going to take years, decades possibly, and it's not really a venture investment type of opportunity, because VC funds by their nature are usually 10-year investment funds, and so if they can't get their money back in 10 years, they're not going to put their money in. Government doesn't have that restriction. Government can make those long-term investments. And so we see that across agriculture and other markets where the governments really have to lead it. If you look at the Infrastructure Act that the United States put in, we are now seeing billions of dollars in e-vehicle charging infrastructure, battery development, and it's all going to be onshored. It's going to be brought to the United States. And so, number one, I don't know how Hawaii is leveraging that infrastructure bill, but also if Hawaii had its own program where it said, look, we are really going to invest heavily and we're going to attract. At the end of the day, entrepreneurs follow the money, and so, whether it's, the guys from Stripe going to the US or the guys from Volta going to, they're going to follow the money. So if the money's not here, they will go somewhere else. I think one of the things that like the examples that John gave in terms of Ireland, Israel, and I think Singapore as well, they're wealthy nations. So even though they may be small in terms of population, they have high-tech industries and they have wealth that they can invest. I think, to me, the one thing that I take away from Singapore is Singapore massively invests. You've got all of these funds like Temasek and these other entities that pour billions of dollars into technology, and then they have offices. You're in Chicago. and there are people that are in Silicon Valley, and same thing with Ireland. Ireland's got how many? 30 different countries they have, like offices. So like if you start thinking like, hey, Hawaii's gonna be a global center, how do we invest to, have those connections? And then the other piece that all three of them also talked about is diversity. You have the advantage of being part of the American economy and ecosystem, so you can leverage everything that America has, but you also have this very rich, culturally diverse body of people, and if you can figure out how to add to that, to Chenoa's, make it exciting and interesting for people to come, but then once they're here, don't say, aloha when they arrive, and then like, all right, now go home. But actually stay. You could turn this into whatever you want it to be, but it takes the social and political will to actually make it happen. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Yeah, I think if you look at the assets, aquaculture, ag tech, agriculture is part of the backbone of this island, or these islands, and it's a great strength that you actually have. You are part of the US. Sometimes you take something for granted. You're part of the US, and the opportunity that you have compared to international countries that are not part of the US, is massive in terms of being able to do business, raise funds, grow a company. I think that you speak English. I know this sounds very obvious, but it's very difficult if you're an international company and you don't speak English.
Do you speak English?
I have a twang. and these are kind of basic things. In Ireland, we've leveraged that. There's 2 agencies that were set up in Ireland. The IDA, which is attracting big corporations like Google, Intel, Apple, Cisco, you name it, to Ireland. And then Enterprise Ireland, which helps the indigenous or Irish-based companies be successful and help them grow and scale. But there's massive money that's being put into these companies. And to your point, the IDA, who are looking to bring corporations or FDI to Ireland, is a simple phrase: go fish where the fish are. If the fish are in Silicon Valley, that's where you go to fish to bring them. What can you bring them here or attract them? And likewise with Enterprise Ireland, they're the biggest venture capital fund of funds in Europe because they put all the money into venture capital to be able to support the companies that are there. So these are some of the things that other nations are doing and doing really well and should be able to be done here if there's the commitment and the focus and the will. And I think government can create the environment. Government can have a vision to do this, but it has to be done with industry and also with key communities, the entrepreneurial community here as well.
We only have a couple of minutes left, but I'm wondering about the attractiveness of Hawaii. Obviously, it's paradise. It's an incredible place to live, but also that comes at a cost. Chenoa, I'm wondering if you could kind of speak to that and talk to maybe the potential for incentives to bring these startups or entrepreneurs along to Hawaii and have them actually stay. What can be done to
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the issue of incentives is a tricky one, and we've
Always.
kind of been there, done that, and we learned some valuable lessons, I think, along the way. But it is hard to have nothing, right? I mean, when people say, why should I come to Hawaii now, or should I move my company to Hawaii, or is it time for me to come home? We get a lot of those calls from the diaspora, as we've been talking about. There's a ton of kama'aina out there that are dying to come home, that want to come home, that don't think there is a path for them back. And, you know, I have a company, I started it here, I want to move it to Hawaii, but what can Hawaii provide for me? The answer right now is nothing, a really high cost of living. Good luck. You know, so we have to be able to offer up something, and right now there really isn't anything. I don't think there's political will for that. I mean, that has been our experience. Incentives here are very, very difficult to get through the legislature, and we just have not succeeded at that. But you know, here's hoping that we can turn that around too. You know, because really, I think these industries are our only hope. Our cost of living is not going to go down. I think we have to be very realistic about that. We are on an island in the middle of the Pacific. Our cost of living is going to be high. It's high in Singapore, right? So what we need to do is work on the other side of the equation. The other side of the equation being, how do we increase our revenue? How do we increase our wages? We are also very poorly paid here. So that's the double whammy. That's the price of paradise. And really the only industries that give us that opportunity to be well paid are in the tech realm. There is nothing else that is going to do that for us. So it's really the only answer here to get us out of this place where we are, which is really stuck between, you know, a high cost of living and low wages. So getting out of the service economy is, I think, really key. But I think, you know, something that we're seeing more and more here too is leveraging those economies. So how do we leverage the service economy that we have? Tourism is the biggest economy here. It's sitting right in our backyard, and we need to leverage that. We are big proponents of that at Blue Startups. We're talking about technology solutions in the tourism industry, sustainable tourism solutions. We can be leaders in these areas because we already have a big industry here. Nobody's going to question a startup working in that area that's coming out of Hawaii. Why are you in Hawaii? It doesn't make any sense. Well, I'm in the travel space. Oh, okay, cool. You know, we have a few companies here, a handful of local companies that are growing and thriving in that space. Shaka Guide, Activator, Turno. These are companies that are making multi-million dollars here, and they are exporting their IP, their technology from Hawaii, and nobody's questioning that because, again, they're in this space, travel and tourism, that kind of makes sense for them to be here. And they can leverage the industry that's in their own backyard. So I think those are some examples of ways that we can leverage what we have and move into the future with what we have.
And I think that leverage part, you know, what you have also is you have millions of people coming here, venture capitalists, investors, corporates. I've been here 25, 30 times. I've never looked at a startup. If you had a showcase here on the island, that was a showcase, whether it's ag tech oriented or whether it's broad tech oriented, but a really significant showcase, I would go there and I would listen to pitches and I would hear what's kind of going on. And I think instead of getting all the literature on going to all the different islands and surfing and swimming and lying on the beach, there's only so much of that you can do. But if somebody said to me, "Oh, well, you're different," but if you had a showcase that you could go to and it was a wow factor, that would be pretty amazing if it was marketed and people knew about it.
Yeah, okay, that's a great plug for me. Thank you very much. So we do a conference called East Meets West every year, and it is a showcase for all things tech coming out of Hawaii. And I would love to get more support from our government for that. Let's blow it up. I mean, these are the things we should be blowing up here. To your point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on to what they said, I think it's absolutely right? And just in terms of thought leadership, it's going to be it's going to be a process. But I think that's precisely why the likes of this Thrive Agri-Food Summit is great, right? You bring together people from outside, you educate them, and hopefully they then go back to their own countries, their own catchments, and they spread the word. And slowly but surely, hopefully one day, Hawaii become that global hub for I guess tropical agriculture. And I think Singapore looks forward to working with Hawaii on this, and I do think it's a possibility. It's just how we go about doing this.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you very much, everyone. Our time is up. Everyone's got their to-do list and a lot of food for thought. And thank you again to our panelists.